The stiffest competition in wrestling is the fight for eyeballs. All Out and Wrestlepalooza being on the same day is just the latest example. Let's start with some recent history. After nearly a decade of having no real direct competition, WWE suddenly faced a new rival in 2019 when AEW came on the scene. WWE almost immediately started counter-programming. They streamed Evolve's 10th anniversary show on the WWE Network against the third ever show AEW put on, Fight for the Fallen. WWE caught some backlash for doing that because Fight for the Fallen was a charity show to benefit victims of gun violence. Cody Rhodes, who was one of the AEW executive vice presidents at the time, even said in a promo that no one could counter-program what AEW was doing. But WWE kept right on trying, putting NXT UK TakeOver Cardiff against the second AEW pay-per-view All Out on August 31st. Over the summer, AEW worked out a TV deal to start airing its weekly show, Dynamite, on TNT on Wednesday nights. That put it head-to-head against NXT, which had been streaming on the WWE Network on Wednesdays for 7 years. So WWE worked out its own deal with the USA Network to start airing NXT Live on cable on Wednesday nights to counter Dynamite. They even got a head start. NXT aired its first cable episode on September 18th. 2 full weeks before Dynamite launched on October 2nd, 2019. Both shows remained on Wednesday for about a year and a half. Dynamite wound up beating NXT in the key 18 to 49 demographic, a whopping 74 out of 75 possible weeks. So WWE finally blinked and moved NXT to Tuesdays in April 2021.
Don't miss a minute of the action when NXT lays claim to their new night. This Tuesday only on USA.
The two shows have gone head-to-head a few more times since then. Every October, Dynamite has to air on Tuesday because of the Major League Baseball playoffs. While AEW won the first of those showdowns pretty comfortably, WWE has brought main roster talents to NXT in the years since, drumming up viewership for wins in both 2023 and 2024. Once Triple H took over WWE Creative in 2022, WWE went even harder when it came to counter-programming AEW's pay-per-views. NXT Worlds Collide went up against the fourth all-out pay-per-view that September, with Clash at the Castle happening the day before. The following May, WWE once again put up multiple shows against an AEW pay-per-view. Both Night of Champions and NXT Battleground happened the weekend of AEW's Double or Nothing.
I'm not going to sit back and take this.
WWE got even more aggressive in 2024. King and Queen of the Ring aired the day before Double or Nothing. Bash in Berlin happened just a week after All in London that year, presumably in hopes of getting people in mainland Europe to stay closer to home for a wrestling show. After AEW announced its final show of the year, World's End in Orlando, WWE announced that it would be hosting a house show on the same day, at the same time, in the same city. By 2025, it seems like WWE is modeling much of its event calendar around when AEW is putting on pay-per-views. The weekend of All In 2025 in July, WWE had 3 shows: NXT's The Great American Bash, Saturday night's main event with Goldberg's retirement match, and Evolution. Even with some calls for WWE to stop focusing so much on counter-programming AEW and just put on great premium live events, the plan continues. WWE ran a UK tour concurrent with AEW's Forbidden Door in London, then booked NXT Heatwave for the same day. And then there's Wrestlepalooza, which is set to include big money matches, including John Cena versus Brock Lesnar, and a mixed tag with Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch facing CM Punk and a returning AJ Lee. WWE announced that show for September 20th, which AEW had set for All Out weeks earlier. AEW has since moved the start time of All Out into the afternoon to avoid going entirely head-to-head. But Tony Khan may not be able to escape it forever. WWE seems intent on forcing the issue for the foreseeable future. These sorts of hyper-competitive business tactics are nothing new for WWE. For much of pro wrestling's history, promotions at least somewhat peacefully coexisted in a territory system. The National Wrestling Alliance, or NWA, was an association of most of these territories' promoters. But once Vince McMahon took over his father's New York-based promotion, then called the WWF in the early 1980s, he quickly sought to end that peace and take over any territory he could, and their TV slots. The biggest example of that came on July 14, 1984, when Vince shockingly appeared on the show World Championship Wrestling on TBS. It's become known as Black Saturday among fans. Georgia Championship Wrestling had aired its matches on that show every Saturday evening for 12 years, but McMahon wanted his promotion to be the only one on cable. After trying and failing to purchase the Saturday time slot outright from network owner Ted Turner, McMahon took advantage of some backstage animosity between Georgia Championship Wrestling's various owners to buy a controlling stake. Thus, World Championship Wrestling at least briefly became a WWF show. Loyal fans weren't happy with the style of wrestling McMahon promoted and sent thousands of letters to TBS to bring back the old program. Finally, Jim Crockett Jr. purchased a time slot from McMahon for $1 million, and the final WWF show on TBS aired on March 30th, 1985, the night before the first WrestleMania. Crockett had inadvertently helped fund that landmark show. Turner eventually purchased Crockett's promotion and rebranded it as WCW in 1988.
You can't beat anybody unless you get into the ring with them.
The year before WCW was officially born, McMahon attempted to kill the NWA's biggest event of the year, Starrcade, which had essentially invented the wrestling super show 2 years before the first WrestleMania. In its first 4 years, Starrcade only aired on closed-circuit television, but in 1987, it started running on pay-per-view as well. McMahon saw this as a threat to his own business, so he created a new pay-per-view of his own to run on the same night, Survivor Series. To make matters even worse for the NWA, McMahon had even threatened pay-per-view providers that if they carried Starrcade, he wouldn't allow them access to WrestleMania 4 the following year. WrestleMania was a guaranteed moneymaker, so a lot of providers did, in fact, drop Starrcade 87 from their schedules and only carried Survivor Series. Thanks to McMahon's ruthless tactics, Survivor Series got almost double the buys that Starrcade did that year. Starrcade was moved off its Thanksgiving weekend date to December in the following years. WCW was a pretty distant second to the WWF to the late 80s and into the early 1990s, but the WWF went through a period of business being down in the mid-90s. In the aftermath of the steroid trial against Vince McMahon, WCW's owner saw an opportunity. Ted Turner asked Eric Bischoff, who had worked his way up to senior vice president of WCW after starting as an announcer, what WCW could do to compete. Bischoff said that the company needed a live show on primetime TV every week, so Turner gave him a 1-hour time slot on TNT on Monday nights to go directly against Raw. WCW Monday Nitro premiered on September 4th, 1995. Fans might not have known it at the time, but this would be the beginning of arguably the biggest boom period American wrestling had ever seen outside of potentially the peak of Hulkmania. An estimated 10 million people were watching one show or the other each week. Raw and Nitro would trade ratings victories until June 1996, when the debut of Scott Hall and Kevin Nash as outsiders invading WCW made Nitro unmissable. After Hulk Hogan joined them to form the New World Order shortly after, Nitro started a now legendary 83-week run atop the ratings charts, beating Raw every single time. But WWE knuckled down and focused on building itself back up. Through the feud between Vince McMahon and Steve Austin, the popularity of D-Generation X, and the rise of stars like The Rock, WWE fought its way back into the war, winning its first ratings battle in nearly 2 years, in April 1998. From there, it was all downhill for WCW. It would get its final ratings victory on October 26, 1998, the night after the infamous Halloween Havoc pay-per-view, where the feed was cut due to running too long. WWE soon became the biggest it had ever been, and WCW fizzled out due to some baffling creative decisions and mismanagement. Finally, McMahon purchased his biggest rival in May 2001, a move that was aided by the AOL-Time Warner merger in 2000. The new head of Turner Broadcasting canceled all wrestling on Turner Networks. WWE had won the war. WWE didn't really have a major pro wrestling competitor for quite a few years after the death of WCW. TNA started as a pay-per-view only company in 2002, getting TV deals off and on, but the company didn't really make much of an attempt to genuinely challenge WWE's dominance until 2010. That's when two of the big names from WCW, Bischoff and Hulk Hogan, made their move. TNA got a major deal with Spike TV in 2005, and WWE started to struggle a bit in the late 2000s, after a change to a TV PG rating to appease sponsors in the wake of the Chris Benoit case. So Hogan and Bischoff, who had both come to TNA in the months prior, struck on January 4th, 2010. Hogan made his TNA TV debut on a special episode of TNA Impact that night, which was a Monday.
You guys, TNA and the Maniacs, we are making history tonight.
The 3-hour special episode went head-to-head with Raw and is still seen as one of the biggest nights in TNA history. Aware of the competition TNA suddenly posed, WWE had Bret Hart make his return to Raw for the first time since the 1997 Montreal Screwjob. Hart buried the hatchet with longtime rival Shawn Michaels, while Raw comfortably beat Impact in the ratings. TNA earned its biggest rating ever. That gave Spike TV executives enough confidence to move Impact to Monday nights, starting that March. That choice proved to be a huge mistake. Impact more permanently moved to Monday nights in the middle of the build to WrestleMania 26, and would hemorrhage viewers as the weeks went on. The 2010 version of the Monday Night Wars lasted a grand total of 2 months before Impact returned to Thursday nights on May 13th. It stayed on Thursdays until 2014, when Spike TV didn't renew TNA's deal. That sent TNA into a dark age throughout the 2010s that almost killed the company. Now it seems TNA may be on the brink of being bought by WWE. One of the strangest battles in the history of wrestling on TV wasn't between two rival promotions, but between a promotion and the TV network that aired its programming. While Extreme Championship Wrestling had deeply passionate fans and street cred to spare in the mid to late 1990s, what it didn't have much of was money. The company struggled financially from the very beginning. Numerous wrestlers have stories about not getting paid what they were promised by promoter Paul Heyman. In 1999, Heyman hoped that a TV deal with TNN, the network that would later become Spike TV, would solve his money woes. Heyman announced that ECW would be airing on TNN every Friday night beginning in August 1999. However, this deal would effectively be the albatross that doomed ECW. From the moment the deal was struck, there were problems. TNN wanted to change the look of ECW's product to make it more TV-friendly. Heyman refused to do that, so TNN quite simply didn't promote ECW's show under any circumstances. The original pilots that ECW put together didn't satisfy the network, so Heyman put together a compilation episode to be the ECW on TNN pilot instead. TNN naturally hated it. Former ECW producer Ron Buffone stated on the Rise and Fall of ECW documentary that TNN wanted ECW to look more like WWE and WCW, despite only having a fraction of the budget. Not only that, within just a few weeks of ECW airing its first episode, both Taz and the Dudley Boys, two acts TNN wanted to profile as major stars, left and signed with WWE. Clearly unhappy with ECW, TNN entered negotiations with WWE in 2000 to start airing Raw. Heyman believed that ECW was the test subject to see if wrestling would work on TNN, given that there would be wrestling on the network until 2014. Perhaps he was right. In September 2000, Raw premiered on TNN. ECW was cancelled 2 weeks later. ECW's efforts to find another network proved futile, and the company held its final show on January 13th, 2001, before officially filing for bankruptcy.